What's up, everybody? My name is Joe Brown, and this is Heresy Financial. You know, they say in life that there's only two things that are certain: death and taxes. But in fact, there is a third thing that is certain, and that is that regulators will always find a reason for more regulation. It is impossible to get somebody to understand something if their salary depends on them not understanding it. And so it is with stablecoins. And so in this video, we are going to look at the current crypto landscape and look at why it looks like stablecoins are going to be used as a Trojan horse to usher in central bank digital currencies. Ready? Let's dive in. Have you ever stood near the edge of a cliff? Standing near the edge of a cliff is one of those experiences that just forces you to confront your own mortality. For some people, it gives you a rush. Like when I stand next to the edge of a cliff, it gives me an adrenaline rush. Yeah, there's a little bit of fear, but it's more exhilarating. I love skydiving. I love heights. I love roller coasters, things like that. For my wife, on the other hand, especially if I've got my kids with me, the edge of cliffs just terrifies her, and it is something that does not provide any enjoyment whatsoever. Now, I want you to imagine a cliff. And this is one of those cliffs hundreds of feet up in the air with a sharp drop off, no barriers, no railings, nothing. Now imagine that there is a crowd next to this edge of this cliff. A couple dozen people all hanging out by the cliff. What do you think will happen if one person falls off the edge of the cliff? They got a little bit too close, they tripped, they stepped wrong, they just fall off. What do you think everyone else is going to do? Well, pretty much everybody is going to back away from the cliff, other than maybe a couple of people who will try very carefully to inch closer to see what happened to the guy who fell off. But everybody else is going to back away, and especially if that news story gets out, lots of people find out, people are going to be very careful around this cliff. Which brings us to truth number one. Risk of individual failure eliminates systemic risk. Now enter the interventionista, the sacred regulator. After this person falls, they enter in and they say, no, this is way too dangerous. Everybody who wants to get close to this cliff needs to hold on to a rope. And in order to demonstrate the increased safety of this approach, he has everybody hold on to a rope and he pushes somebody. Well, guess what? Everybody's holding on to a rope, so it acts as kind of like a barrier or a railing for that one person. That one person doesn't fall off because he gets to hold on to the rope and everybody kind of pulls him back. See? Safer, right? Not exactly, because this false sense of security eliminates individual risk, which removes the disincentives from any one person getting too close to the edge, which means that now instead of the crowd fleeing the edge of the cliff, each individual person inches closer and closer. And as you might expect, one gust of wind, one misstep, one trip brings the entire crowd falling off the cliff altogether. Which brings us to truth number two. Eliminating risk of individual failure introduces risk of systemic failure. And as we will see, this is exactly what's going on with stablecoins right in front of our eyes. So first, what are stablecoins? Second, what are central bank digital currencies? And third, what is the path that's being laid right now to lead from stablecoins to CbdCs? So stablecoins. Basically, it's just a cryptocurrency that is backed by something, usually a fiat currency. The most popular stablecoin right now is something called Tether. You might have heard of it in the news. Basically, Tether is a cryptocurrency that is backed up by US dollars. And Tether is the biggest stablecoin right now in terms of market cap. It is actually the third largest cryptocurrency total, and is actually the number one cryptocurrency in terms of transaction volume. So the reason for the redundancy where it's a cryptocurrency that's backed up by something like a fiat, like the US dollar, is to try and create something that has the best of both worlds. You get price stability and you also get payment freedom, because Bitcoin and others suffer from a level of volatility that makes them currently non-usable in the denomination of prices. However, on the other hand, markets are very familiar with pricing things in fiat because fiat has less volatility. Usually. The wider usage of fiat currencies makes a tighter and more efficient market, and usually if there's any risk of extreme volatility that the central bank doesn't want, they can intervene with monetary policy to prevent those large swings in value from taking place. So these two things keep a lid on volatility for fiat currencies. The problem is usage, especially like cross-border payments, because central banks' money is highly permissioned, because central banks control their own currencies. They can censor, they can stop, they can reverse, they can collect data on any many transactions they want. Stablecoins, on the other hand, since they're a cryptocurrency, they operate on their own networks, on their own infrastructure. So there's a very high degree of payment freedom there. So stablecoins seem to offer the best of both worlds. You get the exact same price stability as the fiat that backs it up, and you also get payment freedom to send money to whoever, whenever, for whatever you want. Don't get me wrong. Stablecoins come with massive risks. The incentive to create a stablecoin that is widely used is so high that it can attract massive fraud. In fact, there are allegations against Tether right now that they might not actually be backed up like they say they are. But whenever you hear the word risk, remember the crowd by the cliff. Moving on, what is a CBDC, a central bank digital currency? Because you might be thinking, all money is already digital anyway. Yeah, some people have cash here and there, but for the most part, money's already digital. The main difference is that a CBDC bypasses the banks, bypasses the banking system. Because banks used to be necessary back in the days of gold storage. Somebody would take their gold to a bank, they'd get a receipt, and then that receipt could be used to go get that gold at any time. If I wanted to buy something from you, I could go get my gold, give you my gold, and then you'd go deposit it and get your own receipt, or I could just give you my receipt. Same thing, more convenient. Pretty soon the banks started lending out that gold that people had entrusted to them, and this sparked runs on the bank when people realized their gold wasn't actually there. Instead of outlawing this practice called fractional reserve banking, they nationalized it and created something called a central bank, which is a bank to the banks. So that there was a run on the bank where everybody tried to go get their gold and it wasn't actually there, the central bank would provide the gold to that bank from other banks. Remember the cliff? Remove the risk of individual failure, introduce systemic risk. Eventually, it's got to a point where there wasn't enough gold in the entire system to stop the global bank run, and you might know this event as Nixon closing the gold window. Now, since then, especially with technological advancements, banks have increasingly been playing the role of an unnecessary middleman. So instead of having banks carry out the services of lending and payments and deposits and then using this central bank as a backstop, why not just go directly to the source? Enter the central bank digital currency. A CBDC is simply money or a bank account held directly with the central bank itself, compared to now where only banks have accounts with the central bank. So how does this money, this digital money, differ from today's money held at banks? Well, central bank digital currencies are a highly permissioned system, far more than the current central bank money is. Far more control to stop and reverse and collect data on payments. It would give the central bank the ability to do fine-tuning on economic knobs. It would give them the ability to stimulate local specific areas of the economy using monetary policy like a scalpel rather than a sledgehammer. You could assign everybody's wallets specific dollar amounts that would expire in a certain amount of time if they weren't used, if you needed to, say, stimulate some spending. You could assign people's wallets dollars that could only be used at certain, let's say, registered businesses that are owned and operated by people of a certain wealth or gender or racial or age category. Very powerful tools for the central bank to direct how all resources navigate their way through an economy rather than allowing individual actors to determine for themselves. Remember the cliff. So in light of this, why would anybody ever start using CBDCs? Enter the Trojan horse plan. Step number 1, welcome in the stablecoins. Not all of them, but most of them. Lay out an extremely inclusive regulatory framework where the consequences of not abiding by the framework, not coming in underneath the banner of regulation, would be a high degree of punishment, and the consequences for abiding by the regulation and voluntarily coming in underneath the banner of the regulation, there'd be very little work to be done and very little consequences for doing so. We already see politicians like Warren and regulators like Yellen saying we need to get the ball rolling. We're going to start to see regulators encouraging stablecoins created by the large entities, also known as the controlled entities, like Facebook's potential stablecoin coming out soon, DM. And then all they have to do is sit back on their hands and wait. Wait for a crisis to happen, because one will happen. Remember the cliff? Stablecoins are inherently dangerous. So is keeping your savings in a currency that's lost 99% of its value since inception. Regulators will then use that crisis as a catalyst, as a reason to introduce further tighter regulations. This is the point at which I would anticipate the pilot program for the CBDC being launched, because at this point the infrastructure for stablecoins will have already been built. And the key here is centralization. So they're going to get the big boys like Google and Apple and Facebook and PayPal and Visa all on board using stablecoins that are pre-approved, regulated, and carefully watched over by our beneficent overlords. And this is important because the larger the company and the more centralized these payment systems are, the wider the surface area for attack is. Because if the federal government wanted to, they could go in tomorrow and shut down Visa. They could go in today and shut down PayPal. There's a CEO. There's a board of directors. They have bank accounts that are controlled by the government. Ever heard of the Patriot Act? They have centralized servers that can be unplugged. Just look at what happened with Ripple a couple months ago and what the Department of Justice is currently alleging against Tether Limited, the company. Remember, they've got a board, they've got executives. This is an important distinction because something like Bitcoin has no CEO, it has no executives, it has no board of directors, it has no centralized servers. China shut down 50% of Bitcoin mining, and guess what happened? Wait for it. Nothing. Except for the fact that all other miners that kept on mining got a huge boost in profitability. Bitcoin kept on chugging along. People kept buying. People kept selling. There were no bankruptcies. There were no bailouts. There were no financial system meltdowns. And so it's key. It's important if a government wants to be able to control it for the attack surfaces to be large and centralized. So allow that infrastructure to be built out, especially with the big boys. Get people used to it. Introduce your CBDC alongside that pre-built infrastructure. And then all you have to do is get people used to using it. It'll ideally be used the exact same way as any other digital payment system that people are normally used to. And so you have to show some advantages to get people to start using it. Like, it's more stable than stablecoins because it is the dollar. It's not backed up by the dollar. You don't have to worry about there being fraud of it actually being backed up by something because the central bank can just create as many units of that currency as they want. It has all the same payment possibilities as the pre-approved stablecoins, and you can use it in all the same circumstances that you'd be using any of the others. And every time an event happens where somebody loses money with a cryptocurrency, or there's some fraud or there's some crisis, it'll be used as a catalyst to tighten and increase regulations to regulate all other stablecoins out of existence, leaving the central bank digital currency as the only one standing. Now, just like boiling a frog slowly, this isn't something that can happen overnight. Very few people have still ever heard of stablecoins. There will be an adjustment as the world gets used to using these types of new payment systems. But little by little, just like the witch dropping candy for Hansel and Gretel, CBDCs will be introduced here and there with little sign-up bonuses here and little incentives there, until the only way left to do commerce legally will be with a digital wallet issued by the central bank using payments that are watched, censored, stopped, and allowed by the central bank. I've said it before and I'll say it a million times. Get some of your wealth outside of the banking system while you still can. Because if there's any item out there that the government doesn't want to allow people to be able to buy, gold, silver, Bitcoin, pew-pews, other governments' money, plane tickets to certain countries, they will literally be able to stop your payments in their tracks. Because that's precisely the point of a central bank digital currency, to control how every individual economic actor spends their money and directs their resources throughout the economy. And if you can't see the systemic risk that a system like this poses, well, you just might be the one who starts pulling everybody else off the cliff. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.